Good morning, everyone. My name is Jean Dobie-Giebel. I'm Senior Associate Dean for Curriculum and Personnel in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. And on behalf of the Dean's Office of Hofstra College and the university at large, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to the symposium, Listening to Arnold Schönberg, Compositions, Teachings, and Writings, commemorating the 150th anniversary of Schönberg's birth. This event, made possible through the support of the Office of the Provost, Hofstra Cultural Center, the Department of Music, and the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, brings together scholars, musicians, enthusiasts from around the world to engage deeply with the life and work of one of the most influential composers of the 20th century. I'd like to express a special thank you to our esteemed speakers and performers, both in person and those who are online, who have taken the time to prepare their insights, research, and talents to share with us. Over the next 2 days, we will explore Schönberg's legacy as a composer, a theorist, and teacher, which continues to resonate today. And this symposium offers us an exciting opportunity to celebrate his groundbreaking work and examine its enduring impact on the world of music. It's also my great pleasure to announce that the National Endowment for the Humanities has awarded our conference director, Professor of Music, Dr. Philip Stoker, a grant as part of its summer stipends program to support his research and writing of a revised edition of Schönberg's Fundamentals of Musical Composition, which is widely considered an essential text for music students and composers. So congratulations, Professor Stoker. Thank you all for being here. Let's begin this journey into the world of Schönberg, and may the next few days be filled with stimulating discussions, inspiration, and of course, great music.
Thank you, Jean. My name is Philip Stoker, and I am the conference director for this 2-day symposium titled Listening to Arnold Schönberg, Compositions, Teachings, and Writings. This symposium is one of many events taking place this year to commemorate Schönberg's 150th birthday. I am thrilled to welcome all the conference presenters to Long Island and Hofstra's beautiful campus, especially this time of year. And thank you to all of you who have joined us here in person and those of you that have joined us online. I am so pleased that the Listening to Arnold Schönberg Symposium includes 12 presentations with 13 presenters. So that's two numbers, 12 and 13, that figures very highly into the life of Schönberg. Following each presentation, there will be time for questions and comments, both by the audience here and the online audience. And before we begin with our first speaker, I just want to give some thanks to some individuals for their generous support. Thank you to Provost Charlie Riordan for his support and letting me move forward to organize this celebratory symposium. In the Dean's Office of the Hofstra College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, thank you to Dean Eva Badowska, our Senior Associate Dean, Jean Giebel, and the Vice Dean for Student Academic Affairs and First-Year Programs, Kristen Weingartner. Thank you, Atheline Collins, the Director of the Cultural Center. Thank you for answering all of my endless questions. Thank you. Carol Mallison, thank you so much, and Janine Rinaldi in the Cultural Center. Leo and Matt, thank you so much. Leo is the audiovisual manager from the Office of Event Management and Conference Services. So thank you so much, gentlemen, for getting us all set up online. I don't think any of us Schönberg scholars could do what we do without the tremendous support and assistance of Therese Muxeneder, the head of the collection at the Arnold Schönberg Center in Vienna, Ika Fess, head archivist at the Schönberg Center, Ulrika Anton, the director of the Schönberg Center, and the wonderful staff there. I know that we're all grateful for them and their assistance. And finally, a heartfelt thanks to my colleagues in the music department, including Francesca Casio, the chair of the department, Den Collins, senior supervisor, music librarian, and Patricia Newberg, senior executive secretary. So please give some love to all these individuals. And just want to make sure, are we ready to go with the first presenter? Is that okay? Yeah? Okay. Joe? You ready? Okay. Our first presenter this morning is Joseph Auner, who is Austin Fletcher Professor of Music at Tufts University. His research and teaching include Schönberg in the Second Viennese School, Weimar, Berlin, Music and Technologies, and Sound Studies. Recent articles include Mapping Schönberg's Three Berlins, Schönberg as Sound Student, Pierrot's Klang, and Weighing, Measuring, Embalming Tonality. Joe's books include The Cambridge Companion to Schönberg, co-edited with Jennifer Shaw, and a Schönberg Reader, Documents of a Life. His textbook, Music in the 20th and 21st Centuries, Volume 6 of Western Music in Context, was published in 2013. He has served as editor-in-chief of the Journal of the American Musicological Society and vice president of the American Musicological Society. In recent years, he has served as the founding dean of University College at Tufts, as well as dean of academic affairs in the School of Arts and Sciences. Prior to coming to Tufts in 2005, he was professor of music at Stony Brook University, just down the road, where he also served as associate provost. The title of his talk this morning is In the Second Room, Schönberg's Technological Imagination. Please welcome Joe.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, so thanks, Phil, for all the work he's done to bring us together and dealing with every detail along the way. It's, it's increasingly clear to me it's a pleasure and a challenge to be speaking to this group of people and Therese and Katharina online. I'm very grateful for all the work you're doing and have done, and I'm teaching a Schönberg seminar for the first time in a while in the spring, and I'm really excited to be using all the stuff that you've been doing in that class. So thank you very much, and special thanks to Severine, who heard an early version of this paper and made a lot of comments, and I hope I've addressed some of them, but we'll see. And a lot of these things are going to be familiar to this crowd, but I hope at least the angle is of some use to you. So here it goes. My talk today is about Schönberg's intensive engagement throughout his life with a wide range of technologies for working with music and sound. With the formulation of what I'm calling Schönberg's technological imagination, I argue that in unique and distinctive ways compared to his contemporaries, Schönberg used a wide array of technologies as tools to expand and transform all aspects of his ways of creating and thinking about music. Still more fundamentally, I will explore how Schönberg's technological imagination embodies his commitment to thinking about thinking, to approaching thinking itself as a technology, to regard the mind and all its capacities, conscious and unconscious, rational and emotional, as a creative resource to be explored and expanded, rather than just as an unexamined mental space we inhabit. Understanding the formative role of Schönberg's technological imagination can illuminate commonalities in his thought across his many spheres of activity, shed new light on his writings, and open up new ways for us to understand his creative process, central concepts such as the idea, and his evolving sense of music's social situation. One way this is made manifest is Schönberg's lifelong devotion of enormous energies to various arts and crafts, including painting and drawing, binding his books, building furniture, making playing cards, his chess set, and many other tools built or envisioned. As discussed in the special issue of the journal, Center's Journal, Arnold Schoenberg Games, Constructions, Bricolages, edited by Therese, Muxeneder, and Eike Fess, these are all more than just hobbies or tinkering, but reflect a way of experiencing and understanding the world through technologies. In a conversation from October 26, 2023, Nuria Schoenberg-Nono described to me what the family called the second room that was situated next to the famous composing studio. This was where Schoenberg kept tools for his many projects. After his death, it was where the family would gather to watch television. As I argue below, the notion of Schoenberg's technological imagination suggests that we might consider the composing studio and the second room as deeply interrelated and interdependent. It is important to emphasize at the outset that with the word technology here, I'm not evoking historical understandings of the term that might have been familiar to Schoenberg over his long life. Indeed, while as I discussed below, Schoenberg was very interested in and engaged with many individual technologies throughout his life, and even invented several himself, he did not use the term in the way I'm using it here, and it has not been a central focus of scholarship, including my own. Wait, okay. It's noteworthy that the term technology is not included in the indices of style and idea or other collections of his writings. This is in contrast to the considerable scholarship on the importance of new technologies to many contemporaneous composers, such as the noise and futurists, Busoni's interest in the telharmonium, the impact of the phonograph on Hindemith, Stravinsky's deep involvement with the player piano, Weil's works for the radio, Varese's art science dream of new instruments, or even Berg's incorporation of film and filmic techniques in several works. Where Schoenberg does discuss the broad sphere of technology, it is usually in a critical context. In Patricia Carpenter and Severine Neff's introduction to Schoenberg, The Musical Idea and the Logic, Technique, and Art of Its Presentation, they explore the fundamental distinction in German organicist philosophy between organic and mechanical form. While organic form is comparable to the growth of an organism, innate and unfolding itself from within, mechanical form is imposed by external forces. We can see this structure of thought in action in Schoenberg's 1911 essay on Franz Liszt, where he disparages the composer's approach to form as a mathematical and mechanical rewelding of formal components. He concludes, mathematics and mechanics cannot produce a living being. As Carpenter and Neff emphasize, Schoenberg took pains to differentiate science, which has to demonstrate its problems perfectly and completely without omission and from every point of view, and therefore has to proceed systematically, from art, which only presents a number of interesting cases and strives for perfection by the manner of their presentation. And yet, despite his frequent self-presentation as a lonely and misunderstood prophet, keeping his distance from the life of his times, he was in fact always engaged with the broad range of technological and scientific developments and with their cultural, social, and political ramifications. As one manifestation of his technological imagination, his writings are full of metaphors from science and many spheres of technology. Writing to Busoni in 1909, he described his vision of direct communication between the composer and listener, bypassing education and intellect, is comparable to wireless telegraphy that requires only a receiving organ which corresponds to our transmitting organ. In her wide-ranging essay, A Jung Wiener Invents Himself, Therese Muxeneder discusses how Schoenberg engaged with many fields beyond music, including biology, physics, interior architecture, mechanical and electrical engineering, mathematics, and many other branches of science. She cites Felix Greisla's reminiscence that Schoenberg was interested in the structure of any kind of machine, and reports him claiming, "A truly good musician must be able to pilot an aircraft, even if he is sitting in one for the first time." Now, I don't know if that's good advice, and here we're next to where Lindbergh did his flight, and I think that wasn't his first time in the plane. But I think that's a really amazing insight, and Therese has reminded us of that kind of remarkable quote, but I think he really did, I think that says something about how he thought. She notes that Schoenberg's parents had planned for him to study engineering, and a number of his boyhood friends became engineers, including his cousin Arthur Schoenberg. My formulation of technology here draws on approaches from anthropology and from science and technology studies. For example, Stanford engineering professor Stephen Klein answers the question, "What is technology?" with 4 usages that are all relevant to what follows. Klein starts with the least surprising usage. 1, manufactured objects and devices. But shaping all these manufactured physical objects, the concept of technology also includes purely mental processes, as in usage 3, such as knowledge, techniques, and thinking about thinking, that will be my focus in the conclusion. Foundational to my argument throughout is the still broader understanding of technology in usages 2 and 4 that embraces the concepts of the socio-technical networks of manufacture and use through which all technologies are created and utilized. From this perspective, the development and implementation of a technology is necessarily a part of networks of different technologies, scientific discoveries, and people, all interacting through complex cultural structures. Thus, a technology like the automobile only comes into existence through an always evolving network of other technologies, including roads, traffic lights, gas stations, charging stations, car loans, and the manifold legal frameworks that contribute to shaping them all. Similarly, Schönberg's string quartet stand makes clear that all 4 usages of the word technology are interdependent in the way it embodies Schönberg's whole philosophy of performance and interpretation. It determines the player's proximity to each other and to the audience, thus creating a social space and an ideal sound world that had long-lasting ramifications for the way the musicians in Schönberg's sphere, like the Polish quartet, rehearsed and worked, and in turn on generations of students those musicians taught. We will see a similar interdependence of these usages in the 4 categories I briefly survey below: notation, instruments, new sound technologies, and thinking about thinking. We can see Schönberg's technological imagination enacted in the parable of finding a lost key to a locked wardrobe featured in the fragmentary 1917 treatise Coherence, Counterpoint, Instrumentation, Instruction, and Form. He describes a process of first gathering all the keys in the house and then eliminating all those that are obviously too large or too small or the wrong shape. Through these stages, you might eventually find a key that at least fits in the lock, though it still probably won't turn. And he acknowledges that while now and then you might in fact find the right key, or perhaps figure out how to file down another key, you will probably still have to call the locksmith. But his crucial point is that through this process, perhaps one will become familiar with the lock. Jenny Shaw made this passage central to her dissertation on Schönberg's understanding of his gearbeitet aesthetic during the war years. For me, this parable points to Schönberg's way of thinking, working, and creating through interactions with physical and mental technologies that depended on constant experimentation with recalcitrant locks and imperfect keys, but always focusing on the process rather than the end state or some easy solution. The partiality of the results of Schönberg's mental experiment with the locked wardrobe, that is, that you might never find the right key, also relates to a central feature of his technological imagination, namely the ultimate impossibility of trying to fully represent an idea, which can only to a limited and partial extent have a physical realization. But just as crucially, the idea can only be known through its presentation, which is always only partial. As many have discussed, particularly in this room, this is why the concept of Fasslichkeit, comprehensibility, was so central to Schönberg's thinking, with his conviction that to truly comprehend something meant to literally or metaphorically hold it in his hand. One way we might think about Moses and Aaron is in part as a debate about the limits of technology in the attempt to communicate God's message, whether it was through the golden calf or Moses' 2 tablets. Indeed, the climax of the opera is when Moses smashes the tablets in despair, when Aaron insists that they too are images, just part of the idea. I'm not arguing here that Schönberg's individual musical works are thus somehow technological in their structure, but we might regard the pieces themselves in their totality as tools for thinking and working through ideas. With Schönberg, the point was not the final work, the finished product, or the polished performance, but the act of thinking, which explains the vital importance he placed on keeping all his sketches, as well as the large number of fragmentary pieces, such as Moses and Aaron, which did not require completion to have an impact. So, musical notation. The technology that Schönberg discussed the most extensively was music notation, including several writings including style and idea, such as On Notation and Revolution, Evolution, Notation Accidentals. Notation of all sorts was not just a simple expedient for Schönberg, but a tool for thinking, and a tool he conceived very much in terms of socio-technical networks of use, placing importance on every stage of the creative process, from sketch through published score, as well as the broader legal frameworks, including copyright law. And I have his tennis document there just to show that this kind of notational impulse really went to many aspects of his life. Schönberg's technological imagination is vividly clear in his work in 1909 for plans for a music typewriter, significantly a year before his actual experience with a typewriter in 1910. As Therese Muxeneder, Julia Bungart, and others have explored, the music typewriter represents the integration of technical, creative, and spiritual dimensions, with its development coinciding with the months he was composing Opus 11, 16, and Erwartung. His interest in how the device could further facilitate his speed and fluency of capturing his unconscious sensations included its use both for composition and for printing through an electrical engraving system, ideas that he pursued with discussions with engineers, lawyers, and patent offices. Schönberg's thinking in terms of socio-technical networks of technologies is demonstrated especially clearly in his exploration of a new 12-tone notation published in Anbruch in 1925. This was deeply bound up with the ways the 12-tone method itself sought to overcome traditional notions of consonance and dissonance and the technological limitations of a notational system developed for diatonic music by replacing sharps and flats and reducing the number of staves. That he ended up not pursuing this technology should not be taken as a sign of its failure, but rather his awareness of all the other systems of use that would need to be changed to facilitate its adoption, most importantly the need to get musicians to learn it. One of the clearest examples of Schoenberg's technological imagination at work is in his approach to row tables and the myriad devices he used for his 12-tone works, and there's an issue of the journal, the Arnold Schoenberg Center, that really goes into this in depth. He was continually reinventing ways to make physical devices that could help reveal compositional potentialities of the row, enacting a literal Fasslichkeit. As Severin Neff has explored in detail, the use of representational tools to develop his ideas was by no means limited to 12-tone music, as is evident in these versions of Schoenberg's Chart of the Regions, the basis of his theory of monotonality. The multiple versions of the diagram were more than just a representation of a concept, but ways of working through it and exploring its manifold implications. Musical instruments. Schoenberg was extensively involved throughout his life with thinking about and through new possibilities of musical instruments, including their physical and mechanical characteristics, and considering their relationship to compositional practice, orchestration, and the traditions and spaces of performance. Several of Schoenberg's essays, like The Future of Orchestral Instruments and Vibrato, focus on the need for instruments to evolve to overcome their present-day technical limitations, in keeping with the transformations underway in all aspects of music and music making, resulting from radio and recording. His most substantial exploration of the ramifications of new instrumental technologies is the article Mechanical Musical Instruments from 1926, which appeared in Pult and Taktstock, a journal for conductors and composers published by Universal Editions. It followed a number of discussions of mechanization in the journal by Stuckenschmidt and others, responding to the concert of mechanical music that year in Donaueschingen, with works written for the Weltmignon player piano by Hindemith Tock and others. Countering the many technophobes of the time, Schoenberg reminds readers that mechanization had long taken place in many instruments, with the addition of complex mechanisms, valves, and levers. Noting that Bach and Beethoven had survived mechanical improvements to their preferred instruments of the organ and piano, he writes, "It is sentimental to wail about mechanization and unthinkingly believe that spirit, so far as it is present, is driven out by mechanization. Only very small spirits suffer at every turn if they are not given enough room." While he challenges the notion that there is a definitive composer's interpretation to fix, he also acknowledges that mechanical musical performances could have value in capturing more precisely the notation, especially in situations where the realities of the concert business make adequate rehearsal impossible. With prescience for our current socio-technical system of use, where much music is made with musical software and we are on the brink of AI impacting everything, he speculates on the need with any future mechanical instrument for some sort of attendant with exact knowledge and understanding of the work he has performed. He concludes that mechanization will make many instrumentalists superfluous, but he says that still the best ones will make music, and that is no reason to begrudge them and us better instruments. So new sound technologies. Schoenberg was interested throughout his life in the potentialities of new technologies of recording, telephone, radio, film, and though he approached them with his characteristic ambivalence, he He even put this on stage in Von Heute auf Morgen when a shallow opera singer attempts a seduction of the main character of the wife over a telephone call. Danny Jenkins notes in his introduction to his book on the program notes and musical analyses that Schoenberg was an early adopter of the wire recorder, thanks to a gift from Claire Steuermann, especially useful for dictating speeches as his eyesight failed. Schoenberg's awareness of the transformative potential of film dates back at least to 1913, when he wrote to Herzke about the possibility of a film realization of Die glückliche Hand and his 1930 accompaniment to a film scene. In several essays, Schoenberg explored the challenge film would pose theater and opera, noting neither can compete with the realism it offers, thus arguing for the necessity for all art forms to find new paths. As in the mechanical musical instruments essay, Schoenberg also anticipated that sound film would require people with new skills. As has been discussed by Sabine Feist, in his 1940 essay School for Sound Men, he argues that given their crucial role in shaping the final sound in radio, recording, and film, sound engineers should be given a broad interdisciplinary and critical training in the scientific, practical, musical, and aesthetic facets of sound and music. And just for him to kind of understand that and how all these things are interrelated, I think is really remarkable and prescient, certainly. Schoenberg's many writings on the radio vividly exemplify his thinking in terms of complex socio-technical systems of use, in the way that he connected the positive and negative aspects of the radio and its sound quality to composition, politics, and new ways to reach an audience. He also advocated the ability to create different modes of performance, including works arranged for smaller and less expensive ensembles that worked better sonically on the radio, or alternatives to traditional concerts, as with the broadcast of a single short work. While he was politically far from Walter Benjamin, Weil, and Brecht and others, like them he saw that radio offered a very different social role for music in its ability to reach a larger and differently configured audience, as exemplified in his 1931 radio lecture on variations for orchestra. While Schoenberg acknowledges the many challenges his music poses, in this and other lectures he offered the new mass audience concrete tools to approach what he was attempting. Jenkins has a great article in the 2015 issue of the journal, the Arnold Schoenberg Center, about Schoenberg's considerable efforts toward music appreciation curricula. He also notes that in one of his last letters, Schoenberg considered television as a means to enhance musical understanding, so that listeners could hear music examples and see the score to follow along. This is thinking about thinking. Beyond Schoenberg's engagement with the broad spheres of various physical technologies I've sketched above, most central to his technological imagination was approach to the mind and thinking itself as kinds of technology that could be explored, understood, and altered. Schoenberg's approach has clear points of contact with fin de siècle artists, similarly attempting to chart the mind like Pappenheim, Elizabeth Keathley's the expert there, Freud, Schnitzler, and Kokoschka. Many of Schoenberg's writings throughout his life wrestle with the interaction of the unconscious and conscious, and the interaction of what is learned as opposed to what is inborn and instinctive. In his 1909 aphorism, Art is the Cry of Distress, Schoenberg described the mind mechanically as a motor of dark forces, which requires the artist to hurl themselves in among the wheels to understand how it all works. But starting with Pierrot and Die glückliche Hand, and then more explicitly during the works of the war years, he explored serial techniques and what he called working with tones of the motive. We can see Schoenberg grappling with the ramifications of this change in the short essay Art Golem from 1922, where he used the technological metaphor from Jewish folk legends of an artificial creature who is brought to life, sometimes as a helpful servant or protector, sometimes as a dangerous force impossible to control. Using very formal and legalistic language, Schoenberg lays out the mental experiment of a thinker composing, without recourse to his imagination, an intellectually really good invented piece of music. He proposes that we should react to it with the same feeling as we might derive from such structures are created through the purely intuitive use of the imagination. He concludes with striking implications for our own encounters with AI-composed music that, while it is unlikely that such an art golem could be created, yet were it to be possible, then no objection to its artificial, dryly cerebral origins would hold. Many of Schoenberg's works were explicitly attempts to both depict and, still more importantly, to formulate models of various mental processes, such as Erwartung, which he describes as representing in slow motion everything that occurs during a single section of maximum spiritual excitement, stretching it out to half an hour. He explores the creative potential of the function of memory in several pieces, such as the traumatic Holocaust narrative in A Survivor from Warsaw, with Schoenberg's text starting, "I cannot remember everything. I must have been unconscious most of the time." Schoenberg described his string trio from 1946 as depicting his fractured mental state during a nearly fatal heart attack. This music literally becomes a technology for thinking and for experiencing his own thinking, as embodied in the large-scale recapitulation, representing what he described to Leonard Stein as the act of going back and reliving that portion of his life found in the first section with the calmness and perspective of good health. Most closely connected to this conference and all the publications it celebrates, Schoenberg approached writing throughout his life as a tool for thinking about thinking, as vividly demonstrated in his compulsion to engage in a remarkable level of introspection, second-guessing, and self-critique. Similarly, Schoenberg's voluminous annotations to books and articles, such as that for Fitzner's Futuristengefahr, provides a remarkable record of thought and action, captured both as it happened and as a resource for the future. As is documented in many essays in the 2011 collection Arnold Schoenberg and His Writing, we can see him in the process of thinking and rethinking, formulating counter-arguments to what he just said, and trying to imagine the long-term ramifications of his ideas. He described one goal of the Humanities as making things clear to himself. The willingness to consider and reconsider all aspects of the implications and potentialities of technology, and what I believe sets him apart from many of his contemporaries, is the thoroughgoing way that what I am calling his technical imagination sought to integrate concepts of organicism, Bildung, evolution, and the expressive energy of the idea. Schoenberg concludes the opening chapter with a vivid statement showing his technological imagination at work, with its commitment to open-ended, all-encompassing processes of thinking. He writes, "Our noblest impulse, the impulse to know and understand, makes it our duty to search, and even a false theory, if it was only found through genuine searching, is for that reason superior to the complacent certainty of those who reject it because they presume to know, although they themselves have not searched. It is indeed our duty to reflect over and over again upon the mysterious origins of the power of art, and again to begin at the beginning, again and again to examine anew for ourselves and attempt to organize anew for ourselves, regarding nothing as given but the phenomena." And I think that metaphor really is like very much the same as the metaphor of the finding the key to the lock that you never can open, but you keep doing it, and then you learn about the lock. Using our direct knowledge of phenomena, he writes, we may in turn be led to formulate conjectures that would be justified in getting labeled as science. But we can see a crystallization of Schoenberg's technological imagination in his insistence that any such conjectures be regarded not as solutions, but as experiments, as results of effort to think, as mental gymnastics, perhaps sometimes even as preliminary steps to truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, for such a wonderful presentation. Any comments, any questions? And are we able to see any of the comments on Zoom?
Oh, hi, Severin. Yeah, maybe use the microphone, because then the people on Zoom will be able to hear what you're saying.
From the counterpoint writings, from that point of view, he had a great interest in notation, and particularly for the 15th century, because they determined a lot of our notation. Mm-hmm. The clefs, and you think of his canons, the famous one, where he makes allusion in what was around 1923 to the notation of the 15th century, and particularly Ockegham's canon, and some of the kinds of designs that you so wonderfully displayed do look like those canons, with the mirror imaging, with the forward and backward form. And he also, and I'll just send this to you. It's I had to look up all kind of notation I had no clue about. You know, like what's the source of the treble clef? And he makes up something apparently.
Oh, he invents the treble clef.
Yeah, he has his own invention of it, but it isn't according to the musicological, notation. But to look at some of the designs of the 15th century.
That's a great suggestion, and it's also the way he was interested in sort of what the notation was doing in making possible,
right, and
structurally, and kind of opening
right,
up.
and he had many canons. We know that,
and that's kind of relates to like just the interest in puzzles and things. But
that's right.
Yeah.
Any other questions? What do you think Schönberg would think and react to AI?
Yeah, I actually think there's definitely an interesting question there because, like, I was just at a conference about AI, and what AI does is it analyzes a huge corpus of data, and then using that statistically anticipates that if this happens, what's the next thing that's going to happen? And it's actually scarily good for lots of kind of popular music and things where it can do pretty good, like in a second, pretty good songs. But it really is based upon if this happens, what's the likelihood of this happening? And I think the interesting thing about Schoenberg is like he never let you do that, and just like it seems like he never, like even like you could imagine some other person who's not a Schoenberg scholar saying, oh, the 12-tone method would be perfect for AI because it's their system of rules and you set up this thing and you do this and do that. But it's just so foreign to the way he worked, and we're like, I think with every piece he was reimagining what the system could be and what the relationships are and what kind of tools you need. And I think one of the real damage of the reduction of 12-tone teaching to the matrix, just as this kind of thing that you just use software to create it, is kind of the fundamental misunderstanding of how Schoenberg was using the tools of the row tables to really rethink. But I'm super interested to do some experiments with systems to see what, because right now, like in the Suno program, you say, write me an ambient track with voices and harp that's about cats and cat ladies. Sorry, and it will just do it, and it will come up with a pretty good thing with lyrics and everything. But if you said, I really do want to experiment to see how much it knows about Schoenberg. My sense is that Schoenberg is pretty impenetrable to AI. I asked it a question about, now who was that person in Schoenberg's family who was an engineer? And the answer that came back on ChatGPT was, oh, that was his uncle Alexander Zemlinsky, who was his teacher and was a skilled engineer. And it's like, well, no, I don't think that's quite correct. But so I actually think it would be a real interesting test of AI and sort of how it works, and also to say something about Schoenberg to figure that out. Yeah.
How do you think he would use it?
Oh, how would he use it?
In his compositional.
Yeah, I think he would be really interested in it. Yeah.
True, yeah.
And if you just think like the systematic, say in the harmony era, where he says, okay, let's look at every possible thing and now do that in every key. Like, I think he would think that was super interesting the way it allowed him to do that. But I think he would see it more as like a challenge and a problem and a tool.
That's right.
Yeah. But a lot of people would know a lot better answers to that. Therese is online. She probably has thought more about this than I have. Yeah.
Great paper, and
Thank
I
you.
have actually no questions. Just to mention, there are actually apps, 12-tone apps, that help you create matrices.
Yeah,
and so
but I
forth.
think that I would think it'd be more interesting to have it would be a Schoenbergian to have a 12-tone app that reimagined all the different ways that you could create row tables and what is the row table actually doing. Like Schoenberg, I think, really thought of them as kind of mystical tools that did things that he was trying to understand about kind of the deep structure of tonal relationships and sets and things like that.
I agree with that, but the the idea of searching for the keys so that you can learn about the keyhole. So he would use that, but the last thing he would want to do is have it create art and let that, or for us, let it create for us instead of being a tool for us to explore even further. So he's still going to, it's not a way of removing us from the creative or the act of learning.
And I think that art golem, the art, like it's really important to remember, like these are things that they were just private documents. Like that art golem thing was a tool for him to think through this thing. And it's like he's a lawyer sort of imagining himself before God presenting this problem and what would God say about this thought process. But it is interesting where he comes to, like that you really could have a golem that you couldn't object to it in principle, I think he's saying. Like that you might object to it on other things, but maybe not in principle. And I don't know if, maybe Therese would know if there are other things that he really sort of goes down the art golem thought process and thinking that through.
Any other comments for Joe?
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Such a wonderful paper. All right, give us a few seconds to get set up here for Therese and Katharina. Oh, great. Wow, there they are.
I hope you can see the PowerPoint.
Yes, I think we can see. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And you also can hear us.
Yes, we can hear. Can you hear us?
Yes, we do.
Great.
Greetings from Vienna.
I think we're trying to adjust a few settings here, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next set of speakers. For our next talk this morning, we are fortunate to have co-presenters who are presenting from Vienna. So Katharina Bleier studied piano and instrumental pedagogy at the Josef Matthias Hauer Conservatory in Wiener Neustadt, the Mozarteum University Salzburg, and the University of Music and Performing Arts Vienna. She also pursued musicology at the University of Vienna with a master's thesis on Oscar Wilde and Alexander Zemlinsky's A Florentine Tragedy. She completed her PhD at the University of Music and Performing Arts Vienna, focusing on extended piano techniques. And I just want to go off script and say I heard Katharina perform twice for Prepare Piano, and it is fabulous. She is a wonderful performer. In addition to her artistic, pedagogical, and managerial work in contemporary music, she has served as research associate at the Center for Research on Arnold Schönberg and the Viennese School, specializing in the correspondence of Universal Edition from 1930 to 1960. Currently, Katharina is a postdoctoral researcher, co-editor of the correspondence between Arnold Schönberg and his publishers Universal Edition and Verlag Drei Lilien, a critical hybrid edition, and a lecturer at the Center for Research on Arnold Schönberg and the Viennese School at the University of Music and Performing Arts, Vienna. Katharina's co-presenter is Therese Muxeneder. Therese studied violin at the Mozarteum University Salzburg, as well as musicology and German studies at the University of Salzburg with a master's thesis on Robert Schumann, and the University of Vienna with a dissertation on Arnold Schönberg. From 1991 to 93, she worked as a research assistant on the complete edition of the works of Christoph Willibald Gluck. Between 1993 and 97, she served as research assistant and librarian at the Bibliotheca Mozartiana of the International Mozarteum Foundation in Salzburg. Since 1997, she has been the head of the collection at the Arnold Schönberg Center in Vienna. From 1998 to 2022, she held teaching positions at the University of Music and Performing Arts Vienna, the University of Vienna, and the Mozarteum University Salzburg. The title of their talk is Schönberg Goes Digital Humanities. Please welcome from Vienna, Katharina Bleier and Therese Muxeneder.
Greetings from Vienna, liebe Schönberg-Freunde und Freundinnen. We thank you for the invitation to participate in the symposium and for the opportunity to present our project. Also, thanks to Yannick Franz and Philippe Chiera, our colleagues at the project. The anniversary year celebrating Arnold Schönberg's 150th birthday provides impressive testimony to the composer's significance today. The anniversary year also provides an opportunity to assess the current state of Schönberg research, identify desiderata, and formulate future perspectives. Essential foundations have already been established. The critical edition of Schönberg's musical works will soon be completed with a combined catalogue of works and sources. A series of new urtext editions of the compositions published by Hähnle in Munich are optimized for practical use. 5 volumes of the 9-volume publication series Schönberg in Words, edited by Sabine Feist and Severin Neff, have already been released. A recently published Schönberg handbook, with contributions from 20 authors from Europe and the US, provides an overview of the composer's life, works, reception, and influence. Schönberg research is far from complete, and many aspects of the Schönberg universe are still awaiting exploration. In the future, research will need to redefine itself, align with technology, and increasingly make use of digital methods. With our presentation today, we aim to provide insight into this sphere and introduce an editorial project that, for the first time on a larger scale, is working on Schönberg's correspondence using methods and tools from the digital humanities. While traditional editorial practices are characterized by historically developed diversity, the inclusion of digital working methods adds yet another layer of complexity to this field of research. In addition to disciplines traditionally involved in the field, for instance, editorial philology, other research areas, for instance, layout and text recognition, data visualization, computational linguistics, are now influencing the development and implementation of digital editions. AI will exponentially expand research methods.
The project we are presenting today is a historically critical edition of Arnold Schönberg's correspondence with the Drei Linien and Universal Edition publishing companies. Before emigrating to the US in 1933, Schönberg published the majority of his works at the publishing companies Universal Edition in Vienna and Verlag Drei Linien in Berlin. The correspondence between the composer and these two publishers, numbering around 1,750 letters and documents, was exchanged over a period of almost 4 decades. It allows insight into the production of printed music ranging from manuscripts to printed scores and orchestral parts. It documents the communication between the artist and persons and institutions involved in the performance of his works, and illuminates the complex procedures that prevail in an international music publishing company. The latter span a period that includes the 2 world wars and also enable conclusions to be drawn about contemporary events, ultimately creating a cultural panorama of the epoch known as musical modernism. The heterogeneous documents are divided into a primary corpus of sources of direct exchange, such as letters, postcards, picture postcards, letter cards, telegrams, business cards, etc., and a secondary corpus of other sources, enclosures, invoices, contracts, promotional brochures, notes, and third-party letters, etc. This diagram shows the number of letters per year. Blue represents the publisher Drei Lilien, pink represents the Universaledition, and orange represents the identified but lost letters. The edition is conceived as a so-called hybrid edition, which refers to a scholarly edition that consists of both a digital and a printed version. Both formats are based on the same files: the transcriptions, indices, commentaries, and apparatus. Typically, the digital component of a hybrid edition is more comprehensive than the printed version, which is designed to fulfill specific functions. The printed edition usually has its own introduction. The commentaries cannot be dynamically integrated into the edited text, but instead appear as footnotes or endnotes. Additionally, most printed editions include facsimile pages for illustrative purposes only, whereas the presentation of digital facsimiles is an essential component of digital editions. Increasingly, so-called digital-first editions are being developed. Generally, and this is also the case with the Vienna-based project, the aim is not simply to duplicate the content, but to optimize the potential of each medium. Our online edition is designed for in-depth exploration and interconnection with other sources from the Schönberg archive, as well as international collections. For data input and programming of the web application, the digital working environment Ediarum is used, along with the editor Oxygen XML Author and the open source XML database ExistDB. Ediarum is a software project of the Telota initiative of the Berlin-Brandenburg Academy of Sciences. And it has a modular structure that's designed for editions. Sorry. The encoding of metadata, text, commentaries, and indices is based on the guidelines of the Text Encoding Initiative, TEI. We have selected some examples to demonstrate the infrastructure of the overall edition, the implementation of the transcriptions, as well as commentary. We show our examples from our internal version, which has some functions that have not been published yet. Some of you might have noticed that the edition is accessible online since Tuesday for everyone. The project's website includes letters, documents, indices of persons, organizations, places, compositions, writings, stamps and preprints, and events. A section provides information about the project, including editorial guidelines and the project team. Additionally, there's an option for full text search. In the list view of the letters, users can find not only a chronological sorting of the letters, but also filter functions, for example, by year, by transmission status, or correspondence partner. When a filter is applied, the corresponding selection is displayed, leading to the detailed view of a letter. In this detailed view, you can see a few examples of how textual critical details are presented. such as an insertion above the line, which is indicated as such through a tooltip, or an underline that's represented accordingly as underlined. Additionally, here we can see a note by Schönberg at the bottom margin, which can be optionally displayed as a recipient's note. Alongside the digital facsimile and the critical text version, a simplified reading version is also available. This is an amended text that has been edited for clarity and accessibility, making it suitable for a wider audience. Music examples present in the correspondence are encoded accordingly, according to the guidelines of the Music Encoding Initiative, MEI, and integrated into the letter text. Now we enter another letter. In the third section of the letter view, the metadata is displayed. We provide a link to the corresponding entry in the Arnold Schönberg Center correspondence database, as well as information on the sender and recipient, the location of the source, and references to previous publications. In this case, an English translation in the edition Schönberg's Early Correspondence, edited by Ethan Heimer and Sabine Feist. Now let's turn to the connection between letters and indices. The following link leads to the index of stamps and preprints. There, scans of all stamps and letterheads and other formwork, along with their associated letters, are listed. This compilation can provide valuable insights into dating of documents, not only for our own corpus, but also for other editions. Within all letters, all entities are linked to indices. This entry in the index of organizations illustrates that the indices are also interconnected. From the organizations index, one can access the index of places, including a map, or the persons index to find related individuals, such as Max Marschalk. Indices not only provide the traditional function of cross-referencing mentions in letters, but also include links to authority data. This ensures the integration of the edition into broader data structures. In den Brief, bitte. The symphonic poem mentioned in the third line of this letter leads to the works index of Bleier and Melisande, which lists information about publication during Schönberg's lifetime and contains references to related works and versions. Finally, we demonstrate commentaries on specific parts of the letter. In the first sentence, Max Marschalk congratulates Schönberg on excellent reviews. The commentary clarifies that the reviews refer to the premiere of Bleier and Melisande. Details such as date, location, program, and participants can be found in the events index. From there, one can also access the digital facsimile of the program leaflet. We do not know which reviews Marschalk took note of, but we can refer to the newspaper clippings in the Schönberg estate. In this letter, Marschalk also urges Schönberg to return borrowed books by Gottfried Keller and Konrad Ferdinand Meyer. Annotations in Schönberg's copies reveal that he did not comply with the request. And finally, the letter also discusses the Bleier score. Music manuscripts are similarly assigned to specific passages according to the Schönberg complete edition, if possible, which is not always easy to detect which one exactly is meant. The display of the digital facsimiles in the letter view is done through the Mirador viewer, which is also used by the Arnold Schönberg Center Correspondence Database to display the digital images.
In connection with the previously mentioned fundamental focus on content exploration, we now turn to the added value of the print edition, which we see in the following features. The book will include a thematic and an editorial introduction in the form of longer texts. In contrast, the online edition does not have any accompanying text. Each year of correspondence will be preceded by a timeline tailored to the letters, following biographical data for the respective years. There will be key dates in publishing history and an additional section on culture, politics, and other contexts. Emphasis will be placed on dates that are not apparent from the content of the correspondence and that further contextualize the letters beyond the commentaries on specific passages and content. The chronology of musical works will include not only the general key data of the works, but will also break down composition dates in detail to illustrate the concurrent developments in Schönberg's compositions. Publishing dates of the works by the publishers will also be taken into account. A chronological integration of selected writings by Arnold Schönberg will allow for insights into the composer's areas of interest in parallel with his compositions. We intend to present thematic commentaries in a modular format with 3 different areas: work modules, modules on administrative matters of the publishing relationship, and context modules. Tools of the digital humanities for Schönberg research. The current status and future of text and music encoding, cultural analytics, media studies about all artificial intelligence is without limits. Encoding, an option for Schönberg's music. Future perspective. AI-based transfer of the critical Arnold Schönberg Gesamtausgabe into a fully digital edition. Here we can see an example extracted from the digital Mozart edition, the Salzburg Mozart Foundation. This core text could be encoded in the OpenXML-based format of the MEI, a music encoding initiative which facilitates documentation of editorial decisions and allows for continuous updating of the edition. A visualization program could translate the machine-readable XML code into regular musical notation. All variants and editorial interventions can be made visible directly in the music. The data format would allow a dynamic representation of the music adapted to the user's needs, including the production of individual parts. Another option, a Schönberg diarium, Schönberg day by day feature from all encoded data from letters, writings, and musical sources. Data visualization, an option for learning about Arnold Schönberg's places of activity in Europe and US, meetings, reception of cultural life. In the digital humanities, data visualization is a computer-aided process that can be used to display and analyze humanities and cultural studies data in such a way that a visual representation of the inherent contextual or content-related relationships is created. We could use AI to explore the history of specific terms in Schönberg music theory. For example, what is the term Grundgestalt about? Where did it come from? Where did it go? Is it based in chemistry or in philosophy, in literature, or even in music? And an ontology of narratives of Viennese modernism could provide information about Schönberg's writings. For example, intertextual elements in Schönberg's polemics, and the polemics published by Karl Kraus in the journal Die Fackel, The Torch, or intertextual elements in Schönberg's writing on aesthetics and lectures on aesthetics by Adolf Schloss. To be continued. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Therese, Katharina. Wonderful presentation. And congratulations on the publication, the digital publication of the correspondence between Schönberg and Universal Edition. I was playing around with it the other day, and I could not put it down. I totally got lost. So congratulations, and thank you on a wonderful talk.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments for Therese and Katharina? Yep. I don't know if you can see us or not. Can you see us?
Yes, we can
okay.
see you.
So this is Severine.
Yes.
Oh, it's a fabulous, fabulous thing that you've done. And, you know, Phil let me see his copy. And just the connections between the American period and the European. I don't know, I just, obviously, I have counterpoint on the brain, whatever, but that you could see certain events, say in 1946, when Schönberg was so unsuccessful here at publishing fundamentals, but he was also searching at Universal, and to see the kind of interplay between the two, which I didn't know about. And it also tells us how certain theoretical manuscripts could, what his plans were to even do them, because, as you know, he dropped them a lot and then picked them up. But I think it'll change research, because the amount of time it would take, say, us sitting here in the United States to go and find the letters of Universal, or to locate things that are essential to produce better scholarship, really. Everybody has good intentions, but, it's just extraordinary. It really is. It's great.
Yeah, thank you. And although the majority has been written in German, the content of the letter, so there is no problem by doing your own translation via Google Translate or whatever, at least for those who can't speak German, to get an idea about the content of the letter. So this is also something, it's not new, but it's a more recent feature of ChatGPT, DeepL, and Google Translate to be able also to convert to translate the content. I have to admit, it would be great to have the whole Schönberg correspondence encoded like this, but this would take years. But also the technology and the tools are improving. Katharina knows more about it than I do just by probably using transcribos. What do you think, Katharina?
One thing is that, of course, transcriptions can be made, but also I know a digital humanist here in Austria who is experimenting a lot with encoding TI and MEI with artificial intelligence. So in a not so far future, it might be not that time consuming to encode all these texts and letters. So that's a hope that we can get larger corpuses to interconnect in an additional environment like ours, for example.
So, hi, this is Joe Auner talking. That was amazing material. It's tremendously exciting. I feel like I go to the center site already all the time, and then to think about doing this, and also as a teaching tool for our students who are increasingly interested in digital humanities approaches. So my question is, it does, like you're building kind of all these intellectual structures for what you do with this material, and it seems like it's is there any other, do you have models for people who have done this for other archives? Just because, I guess my question is, it seems like Schönberg's archive is unusual in how comprehensive it is and how all these different things, you actually have access to them, and the correspondence and the letters and the sketches and the photographs. And so you're having to build an intellectual model for how do you map an archive. So do you have, are there other people who have done this with other composers that you can use? Are you building this whole machine yourself?
No, we did not actually have from other archives, because it was in the concept of our project that we can rely on all the different sources of the Arnold Schönberg Center. Because, as you all know, high critical edition can also focus on totally different aspects of more text critical issues. So no, we did not rely on experience of other archives.
There is, I think, a 35-letter project which has been done at the university in Berlin. It's the Schönberg-Busoni correspondence, which also has been encoded, and they are including the digital facsimiles, but not this kind of linked data. This is one of the assets which is possible because we have this, as everyone of you know, this vast collection of material. We are not limited with respect to copyright, so we can add whatever we want, and there is so much more going on right now, also with the Austrian and German newspaper scene. So there is more full text search possibility also for commentary. So, and everyone, we don't need to describe that too much, so we can show the images. And I guess this is something which can be added to other correspondence, Schönberg correspondence editions in the future. But not every institution is lucky enough to get public funding for a project like ours and has everything there on site. But Schönberg was a pioneer all his time, so why shouldn't it stop here?
Any other comments or questions? I myself am really curious about the starting stages of this project. Could you describe what the physical conditions of these letters are at Universal Edition? Was it organized? Was it not organized? Could you explain a little bit about starting the process?
I think it started some years ago, many years ago, when we got the whole music collection of Schönberg music collection of the Universaledition being transferred to the Schönberg Center as a permanent loan. And once we started to think about this project, they also transferred all the letters in their possession to the Schönberg Center. So we both have the musical sources and the letter sources here on site in the Schönberg Center. Although there are quite a lot of letters missing, especially from the period of the First World War.
And there's also, the project is also grounded in the work I've done before this project, which dealt with correspondence of Universaledition from 31 to 61, which is not confined to Schönberg, but everything from other publishers to internal correspondence to music teachers to it's everything in 400 packages in the behind me. So, I think that maybe sometime with some methods of distant reading or something like that, this would be possible to access. So this was also basic to the idea of actually doing this project.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Therese, Katharina, thank you so much. Wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, give us a minute to get set up for our next presenter. There are some goodies in the back. All right, our final presenter this morning is Elizabeth Keathley, also known as Childless Cat Lady. She is Professor Emerita of Music History and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies at University of North Carolina, Greensboro. She earned her PhD in music history with an excessively long dissertation supervised by Joe Auner. And she says here, that is not your fault, Joe, that it was so long. With Marilyn McCoy, Elizabeth translated and edited the correspondence between Alma Mahler and Arnold Schönberg, and her articles on women and gender in modern music have appeared in the Journal of the Arnold Schönberg Center, American Music, and so on. She is an associate editor of the Journal of the International Alliance for Women in Music. Elizabeth dwells in Tacoma, Washington, with a man and 3 cats. The title of her talk this morning is Cleo Laine Performs Schönberg's Jazz Masterpiece, Pierrot Lunaire. Please welcome Elizabeth Keathley.
Thank you. Is this microphone good? You can hear me fine? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. How about now? How about now? Okay, good. I want to make you happy. Thank you, Phil, for organizing this, and thank you, Hofstra, for hosting us, and thank you all for being here. I love being around my Schönberg peeps, so it's lovely. Okay, so I want to introduce the singer Cleo Laine. She was born Clementina Dinah Hutchin Campbell on October 28th. Next Monday will be her birthday, and she'll be 97 years old. She grew up poor but beloved in a musical household in Southall, Middlesex, England. Her father, Alexander Campbell, was a a black man from Jamaica, had a beautiful singing voice, and her white British mother, Minnie Bullock Hitchin, enjoyed music and dance, as did Clemmy, which was her nickname back then, and her brother and sister, whose names I've forgotten. Cleo came to be regarded as the queen of jazz in England, where the term queen actually means something. So, she was entitled Dame of the British Empire for her contributions to British music, although she may have had some mixed feelings about that because Jamaica, where her father was from, had been a colony and slave port of that empire for about 300 years. Following jobs as varied as librarian and apprentice hairdresser, in her early 20s, Cleo successfully auditioned as a singer for a jazz ensemble, the Johnny Dankworth Seven, led by clarinetist, saxophonist, arranger, and composer John Dankworth, whom she later married. Laine became known for her extensive vocal range, varied timbres, ability to scat sing, and mastery of vocal styles, including jazz, popular music, and opera. So what better vocalist, you are surely asking, for Pierrot's Lunaire, and you are not wrong. For in 1974, 100 years after Schönberg's birth, Laine recorded Pierrot Lunaire with London's famed Nash Ensemble. Let's see. Sorry. I forgot how to give a talk. Okay. So, where was I? Famed Nash Ensemble. A recording for which she garnered the second of her 5 Grammy nominations. That was the only one for classical music. The text for Laine's performance was the English translation by Cecil Gray. And notably, Schönberg did condone performing his music translated into the local language for reasons of comprehensibility. One ramification of Laine's recording is that jazz musicians and their audiences became more aware of the composer and the composition, as they were mentioned many times in music magazines and the general press in accounts of the very popular Cleo Laine and her activities. So whether those readers actually ever listened to Schönberg, I can't really say, but Schönberg's name now appears, for example, in narratives of the UK organization Black History Month. So now we have another activity for Black History Month. We can listen to this recording of Pierrot Lunaire. My acquaintance with this recording began sometime during my later 1990s, not my later 1990s, or everyone's later 1990s, when I was living in Oakland, California, and trying to write my dissertation on Schönberg's Erwartung. I wandered, that really long one? Yeah. I wandered into my favorite used record store, Amoeba Records, looked into the Schönberg bin. Yes, they had a Schönberg bin, and found this. I brought the artifact. I found this, and it just screamed 1970s to me, with the faux vintage typeface, the purplish color scheme, and this fulsome Afro hairstyle, which even white dudes were emulating back then in the 70s. I don't know how many of you might remember that. So I had heard of Cleo Laine, and I remembered hearing her sing on TV shows when I was a kid. I think she was on the Ed Sullivan Show, maybe. And I knew she was a jazz singer, but little else about her. My first thought was, Jazzy Schönberg, why not? And that turned out to be the best $5 I ever spent in a record store, and not just for the groovy picture either. I enjoyed listening to the recording, but I remain curious as to how it came to be and I haven't investigated it enough yet, but this is what I've learned so far, or have figured out so far. The project came about through some confluence of Cleo's own capacious talents and tastes, the advocacy of the Nash Ensemble, and the support from RCA's Kenneth Glancy, quote, an executive who fostered a wide range of musical styles, end quote, as his obituary describes him. Affinities between jazz and modern classical music did help, as did the particular suitability of Pierrot lunaire to a jazz rendering. Although it was nominated for a Grammy Award, the reception of the recording was mixed, even within a single review, like this one by Paul Griffiths. I did it better that time. Even this one by Paul Griffiths, published in the Musical Times. First defaults Cleo's interpretation because, quote, the sounds, rhythms, and accents are just all wrong, pointing to the opening line, finstere, schwarze Riesenfalter, translated as heavy, gloomy, giant black moths, which, Griffiths complains, is lacking in hard consonants, and the final syllable is greatly extended. So let's just play that to see if you agree with his assessment. I like that better.
Heavy, gloomy, giant black moths massacred the sun's bright rays. Like a close-shut magic book brought the distant sky in silence. From the mists in deep recesses rise up sails, destroying every heavy, gloomy, giant black moth massacred the sun's bright rays. And from heaven earthward bound, downward sink with somber pinions, unperceived, great hordes of monsters on the hearts and souls of mankind. Heavy, gloomy, giant black moths.
I love the ending. So did you hear what Paul Griffiths was implicating that, or asserting that the final syllables was greatly extended? Did you hear that kind of thing at all? I mean, it just doesn't even sound like it doesn't read like he actually listened to it, is the impression that I get, because that's not what happened in the actual thing. So then he says, but she can hardly be blamed for playing fast and loose with the pitches and durations in the score, which I find kind of absurd because that is the job description of a jazz singer, to play with the durations and pitches. So, and finally, he says something meaningful, and he says, Cleo finds a different voice for each of the pieces, and her performance resembles what Boulez called a superior cabaret. And now that sounds complimentary to me, so I'm trying to figure out what the origin of his grievance is here. And I think perhaps it's a reticence about a jazz interpretation of a modern classical composition. So that's my theory, and I'm going to go with that. It's worth thinking about the affinities and distinctions between jazz and modernist classical music because they actually have a lot in common. They both emerged in the early 20th century. They tend to be harmonically adventurous and to have a rich palette of sounds and textures. They're often virtuosic, requiring well-honed technique, and both seem to favor smaller ensembles, compare the John Dankworth 7 with, say, a Pierrot ensemble. The biggest distinction, I would say, are that modern classical music has roots in Europe and relies on reading musical notation, while jazz has roots among Black Americans and an oral tradition that includes improvisation. A further distinction that applies especially to singers is that while classical singers tend to prize a certain purity of tone and not vocalize in non-singerly ways, jazz singers freely alter the timbre, rhythm, or pitch for expressive purposes or to vary the original composition. Making highly textured sounds like growling is not out of bounds at all. The Sprechstimme in Pierrot invites this kind of treatment in a way that a conventionally sung song would not. So Cleo Laine is not American, but she is Black, and her Black identity has been meaningful to her, although it's been overlooked by a lot of white people who have written and talked about her. Her own spouse, the white jazz musician John Dankworth, downplayed the role of Black music and Black people and their music in the history of jazz. So, for example, in a 2007 interview of them both, John Fordham of The Guardian wrote, Go, please. Now, when the couple disagree, they do it with an amused tolerance. Jazz was Black music at first, Laine says firmly. It's much more eclectic now, but the blues was at the root of it. She turns to me with a broad smile. Now watch him contradict me. Well, there's a bit more to it than that, Dankworth says. I think jazz began as a combination of French martial music, English religious music, and African rhythms. It's been a hybrid art all along. I have to put on my glasses for this because I want to ask you, has anybody heard of jazz being influenced by those things? French martial music and English religious music? No, I have, well, maybe just because most of us are Americans, I don't know what that is. So the article's discussion of the roots of jazz ends right there. Fordham goes on to other topics, leaving Dankworth's skewed colonialist history, patronizing tone, and the impression that he knows more about Cleo's musical forebears than he does. Similarly, the double biography of Cleo Laine and John Dankworth, written by the white British composer and author Graham Collier, is titled Cleo and John, a biography of the Dankworths, as though Cleo Laine has no individual identity. But in her 1994 autobiography titled Cleo, she clearly embraces her Black identity and expresses her excitement about meeting and working with Black jazz icons when she and her spouse first visited the United States. They went a bunch of times, and eventually bought a house in Sonoma. But when she first came there, she was quite happy to meet them. She is unabashed in her expressions of admiration for these musicians and their influence on her. At the prompting of record producer Norman Granz, Cleo Laine and Ray Charles made a recording of all the songs of Porgy and Bess. So just the two of them singing all of the roles, and that earned her another Grammy nomination. The significance of that collaboration to Cleo is suggested by the fact that the back of the dust jacket of her autobiography bears a tight close-up of her singing with Ray Charles, presumably on that recording. So that was a significant moment to her. Cleo has also been a stage actor and singer in plays and musicals, and while some of the roles she played are not racially marked, for example, her part in Brecht and Weil's The Seven Deadly Sins, others are. Among them are some good roles, but others are what Donald Trump might call black jobs. It appears that in her first acting role was Della in the female lead in the social drama Flesh to a Tiger. That was in 1958, and that play was written by the Jamaican playwright Barry Record. That's a significant role. And in Showboat, she sang the role of Julie, the mixed-race woman who is exposed as passing. I'd say that's a good role in a problematic show. I know it's a good role because Ava Gardner played that in the movie. Cleo also had some ridiculous roles, like in the British comedy Valmouth, where she played a masseuse at a spa for horny old white ladies. And as she complains in her memoir, she was pointed, quote, in the direction of another shop, which was the cheapest supplier of yet another dark body makeup to cover my too light for the part skin. So I'm not going to unpack all of that, but suffice it to say that although Cleo Laine has been a successful and beloved singer and actor, she has faced the conundrum of being both too black and not black enough. Her black identity has been denied and diminished. Cleo's voice. So Cleo is a contralto with an upper extension of her head voice that gives her a range that spans almost 4 octaves. She is not proficient at reading notated sight reading notated music, but she has a fabulous musical memory, and she learned Pierrot by ear. Most of her singing is in her lower register, while her scat singing tends to be in her upper register. There's not this continuous, unbroken flight up to the higher register as classical voice prefers. Rather, in her lower register, her voice has a darker, more textured timbre, while her upper register is brighter with fewer overtones, giving her voice some remarkable expressive qualities. Pierrot lunaire calls mainly for an expressive speaking voice with pitch inflections like that of an actor, and as we know, Schönberg composed Pierrot for an actor, Albertina Tsema. Cleo's particular jazz voice and manner of expression fit well with this composition and bring out the meaning of the text in ways that are somewhat unconventional for classical singers. So I just want to play a couple more examples here.
Through the ball paint of Cassandra's, as he rends the air with screeches, bores Pierrot in breathing tender passion with a cranium driller. He then presses with his finger red tobacco, groaning turkey in the bold Sanders, as he rends the air with screeches.
We can stop that there, but especially the text painting on boars, bearing down on her voice in that way, I think is real interesting. And then I want to play a little bit of Serenade. Please.
Through the ball.
No. Yes. I like that better. Okay, listen to the way she sings Pizzicato.
The giant bow grotesquely scrapes Pierrot on his viola. Like a stork on one leg standing, sadly plucks a pizzicato.
So did you notice that in Pizzicato, she's singing in what's called a whistle voice? I don't know too many classical singers who do that, but I know a few popular singers who do that. Minnie Riperton is one, and Mariah Carey is another. So, and then I want to play a little bit of parody, and this illustrates what Griffith said about a different voice for each of the Pierrot vignettes. He or she transforms her voice to literally parody the character in the story here. Go now.
Knitting needles bright and polished, set in her graying hair. See, it's a doing mumbling in a crimson costume clad. She lingers in the arbor, she loves Pierrot with passion. Knitting needles bright and polished, set in her grey hair.
That's enough of that. That's pretty amusing. Okay, so surely one of the factors leading Cleo to the Pierrot project is her capacious talent and taste. So she and Dankworth developed several crossover projects before this one, such as the Shakespeare and All That Jazz project that was recorded in 1964. And in that, Cleo sang jazz settings of the songs in Shakespeare's plays and some of his sonnets composed and arranged by Dankworth. They also brought that ecumenical approach to their musical education project, the Wavenden All Music Plan, which was a summer school that they created on their estate, Wavenden, and they sought to teach a broad array of music from different styles and traditions. And they never say this explicitly, but I think it was mostly for underserved students. On the Pierrot recording, Cleo is accompanied by the Nash Ensemble of London, considered the premier chamber music ensemble in England, and the resident ensemble of Wigmore Hall. The Nash Ensemble was founded by clarinetist Amelia Friedman in 1964, who called upon her classmates at the Royal Academy of Music to come out and play. Now, I believe she still serves as the group's artistic director, dedicated to performing new and overlooked music, and she's commissioned more than 300 compositions. Recently, in October of 2024, Friedman was awarded honorary membership in the Royal Philharmonic Society at the Nash Ensemble's 60th anniversary concert at Wigmore Hall. So while the Nash Ensemble is not specifically a Pierrot ensemble, as for example the Fires of London or something like that, they have certainly performed Pierrot a lot, and with several different reciters, including Jane Manning, Brigitte Fassbender, and most recently Claire Booth at the Aldeburgh Festival in 2024. While I don't know the exact circumstances by which they came upon Cleo Laine, from their history it seems most likely that they had approached her to do this rather than the other way around. But this recording was made by RCA, and the Nash Ensemble didn't have a relationship with them, but Cleo did. So I'm 94.5% certain that the recording was a result of Cleo's connections. So she had a creative relationship with Kenneth Glancy of RCA. He was originally an A&R guy that he worked with, and then he became an executive. Then he took a lot of interest in Cleo. And when he took over as president of RCA in 1973, he just made a whole bunch of recordings with her, and this is the first of them. So it's really irrelevant to ask what Schönberg might have thought of this recording, but I'm not above irrelevancy, so I'm going to say this. Although he entertained some skepticism about white European imitators, Schönberg had interest in jazz since the 1920s, when he and his fashionable young wife Gertrude frequented jazz bars, and their collaborative opera, Von heute auf morgen, featured instruments associated with jazz of the period, like saxophones and the flexitone, which was supposed to make jazz jazzier. So while the composition of Pierrot predates that period, the song-inflected speech it calls for is not uncommon to jazz, and that suggests an affinity between a jazz voice and this composition. So that's pretty much what I want to say about that right now.
Knitting needles bright and polished, set in her grey.
And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
I think Joe cursed this by his technology talk.
Joe. Any comments, questions for Elizabeth? Yeah.
So Elizabeth, this is Jack Boss. I was intrigued by your comment that she didn't really work with notation that much, but it was mostly learning music by rote. Because, I mean, there's some unique things in this performance, but to a large degree, I mean, she's pretty faithful to the, the dynamics and the expressive markings and that sort of thing. So I wonder, do you know who she was listening to? I mean, were there other performances of Pierrot that she knew, or?
Not that I know of, and the only account I know about her learning it is from her daughter, Jackie Dankworth, and she said she had a recording of it that she listened to over and over, but I don't know who made the recording. That's not been recorded in Jackie's account of that. So, sorry. Maybe she's still alive. I'm trying to get a hold of her. Maybe she can tell me if she remembers, but I don't know why I should expect that. I'm only 70 and I don't remember anything. Yes.
This is just kind of, I don't know if you can hear me, but this is just kind of a comment. Or maybe it has a question in it too. This is kind of a comment. There's a real warmth to the recording. Just in general, the instruments and her voice. I think part of it has to do with the recording, the way that it was recorded. I mean, I'm wondering if she recorded the vocals after the instruments were recorded, or during the performance itself.
You know, that is a really good question I don't know the answer to. I hope to someday.
Yeah, it's really nice sounding. But I think maybe she recorded it after, and it was overdubbed maybe, because it sounds like there's some nice compression built in there, and it's done in a studio kind of thing. But anyway, it's really great.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much, Elizabeth. That was great to hear, and I think it's an amazing performance. The thing that it seems like when I've heard really good performances, they're actually funny, and I can't remember if it was Berg or Schönberg said the piece is light, ironical, satirical, and I think she captures that. But did she perform it live? Because it seems like if she did it live, it would be actually very funny and a cool thing to experience.
She did perform it live.
Okay.
I don't think she ever performed it in the U.S. I think only in England. Mm-hmm. And it got real mixed reviews, but a lot of people loved it.
Yeah.
I love it.
I love the performance too, but does she sing the because of the English much quicker? Are the tempi compared to the original version? Because just a lot of the words are shorter in English, and how does that affect the tempo and the drive? I'm just pointing that out. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I heard.
Well, I don't know. What is the tempo supposed to be? I mean, each piece of it has a different tempo, and I mean, what's
Well, yeah, are they marked? I don't know if Schönberg marked those with metronome. I don't think so.
I don't think
so either.
I think it has, fast or
So does
Yeah.
does the speed just on the timing? I just wondered whether it was faster or I liked it.
Well, faster than what, though?
Then the
I mean,
original because you have the English.
what's the original? Like
Original
the way
German.
Schönberg
Yeah.
did it, or what do you mean?
With the German language.
Yeah, I was just gonna weigh in about the recordings. So the first recording is, of course, the one that Schönberg conducted with, in New York.
Oh yeah, okay, I have that record too.
And
This-
then there haven't been a ton between the 1941 and this is from the 70s.
Yeah.
And so Wayne Shove published a discography, and you could actually look at the commercially released performances of Pierrot lunaire, and you may then trace her interpretation back to the one she may have listened to, and then you could actually make a decision about tempos if it was an oral process, right?
Right. I understand what you're saying now, Sev. If that's that's the recording you're comparing it to, and yes, I have that recording, and this is faster, and I don't know if it's just
Well,
the
I
English or her aesthetic choice.
I'm
you know?
just trying to, get the originality of her interpretation on a sound level. That's why I'm bringing this up. It's Cedri, isn't it? Cedri's wife. Yeah, who did it. And Schönberg, I think, with the performance, felt he learned something about the Pierrot. I don't know. You have to ask Avi or Byron because he had something written on that. When he's talking tomorrow, he could definitely tell you that Schönberg learned things from Cedri, and he learned from a performer. And then, of course, I think we can learn a lot from Cleo Laine, too.
Thanks, Sev.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Hi, thank you. That was really great recording. I was wondering, I think in a lot of like jazz scholarship and also like race scholarship, the intersection between nationality and the genre is not quite talked about enough. I was just wondering if there's specific aspects of whether the British jazz scene at the time or kind of British being a British black national, if that contributed to maybe the version of this process in particular that you can speak about a bit more. I know this is really broad.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what you're asking. I mean, she was a jazz singer, and she was part of that scene in Britain. And I have to say there are some significant differences between what I hear from English jazz at that time from American jazz. So, but she, so she was part of that scene, and so I'm sure it influenced her. But I don't know in what specific way. But that was the scene that she was in, the British jazz scene.
Yeah, I guess you mentioned her starring in the Bracton Vial plays. So I think just in terms of American jazz at the time, things have moved quite a bit from that kind of and I think in the 70s with free jazz and that kind of thing being sorry, this is not super coherent, but
yeah, I take your point. Yeah, it has changed.
Yeah.
And
oh, thank you.
All right, a few more questions. Thank you. Really wonderful paper, wonderful
Thanks.
stuff, and glad to know and hear more of the recordings. I was wondering, so sometimes people bring up Karl Kraus and his sort of spoken monologues, his kind of acting delivery of his speeches in relation to Sprechstimme. And you mentioned she had also worked as an actress. Mm-hmm. Although I maybe missed the timing, whether that was before or after the recording. But yeah, I was wondering if you do such a great job of characterizing the
yeah, the sort of individuality of her sung performance. Are there elements of her acting voice that might have also gone into this, or is there a connection to kind of acting practice that might be another source of the distinctive nature of the performance?
Well, to answer the first part of your question, like when she started acting and singing at approximately the same time, and she acted and sang throughout her entire career until she was pretty old, I think. But and then what was the second part? Was there any influence from her acting in the Sprechstimme? Is that what you're asking?
Any influence, or maybe even any kind of connection to the type of vocal delivery in her acting and in the kind of sung acting of this recording?
I haven't heard her acting, so I couldn't verify this for a fact, but I don't see how it could not be related. I mean, it would make sense, right? No, I haven't. I'd like to, though. If you come across one, let me know.
Yeah, great paper, and I just want to go back to the previous question. And I think what you tried to address is that there was actually a cross-fertilization between jazz and contemporary music scenes in the 1970s with Anthony Braxton and
That's
others,
right.
free jazz, you mentioned it. And even if we go back to Schönberg making recordings, his collaboration with Ross Russell, Dial Records, that was also a label that specialized in jazz recordings, often coming from France and then being released in the US, and then in turn Dial Records made recordings of Schönberg's works or released those as well. So there was this kind of affinity. They were both a little bit at the margin, you know, offered products for acquired tastes, so to speak. Yeah, and so just thinking about Gunther Schuller, the modern jazz quartet, etc.
That's right.
So you have that in the US, and I could imagine that in Britain there were similar vibes going on where people or performers crossed territories.
Well, that was certainly the idea of those two, John Dankworth and Cleo Laine. That was certainly a project that they were deeply engaged in.
Any other comments, questions? All right, thank you to Elizabeth. And thank you to Joe Auner, Katharina, and Therese for their talks earlier today. So give them some love, please. And we are going to reconvene at 2:40. That's Eastern Standard Time. And I thank you for your patience. For those of you that joined us online, I know there's no video, and we're hoping to get that corrected for the afternoon session. So thank you for your patience, and we'll reconvene at 2:40.